Why are Rancors so rare in Star Wars? After 55 years of existing, why is just now only the second time we've seen a Rancor in a live-action movie? For being one of the coolest creatures in Star Wars, according to 30,000 people, I feel like they should have the spotlight a little bit more than they have, and this is going to be just that. In this video, we're going to look at every single different type of Rancor that has ever existed in every medium of Star Wars. There's even one with wings that we're going to talk about at the end of the video, so make sure you watch until the very end. Strap in because I don't think I've ever seen anyone do a video that has covered them all. This is going to be a lot. If you enjoy watching the video, please share with your Star Wars friends and let me know in the comments if you would like more videos like this. Because I really like digging through all the lore and reading all the comics about Sith using dark alchemy to grow massive Rancors to eat their prisoners. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps support me and the videos that I make, and it's totally free. As soon as we hit 500,000, we're going to be investing in a project to alter preserved DNA strands to attempt bringing back real-life Rancors so they will no longer be just a story from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but they will be in a petting zoo near you. Baby Rancors for everybody. Now, the most common Rancor that everybody knows is the one from Jabba's palace, right? This is a standard Rancor, or sometimes referred to as a sand Rancor. These Rancors are these massive carnivorous beasts that were home to the planet Dathomir and were most times seen as just mindless monsters. Essentially, they were the Tyrannosaurus Rexes of Star Wars, but actually these beasts are semi-sentient and were most times actually pretty smart and could form lifelong bonds with their riders or caretakers. And more often than not, they were used to ride into battle. Their tough armor-plated body made them exceptional at taking damage, and their insane size and strength provided a huge advantage in battle. As for the next Rancors, there is 6 different categories that they fall into. The first is the natural Rancors. These are the few base versions that the Rancor started off as. Next is evolved Rancors. These are the ones that mutated naturally and adapted themselves to different environments or conditions. Similar to that one is enhanced Rancors. These all have mutations but were manually changed by people. And then the most juicy category is the force altered Rancors. These are the absolute craziest variations of Rancors the galaxy has ever seen. These were changed through some sort of force manipulation, most times being Sith alchemy, to create unnatural beasts that were absolute units. And then the last group is the unknown variations. These, we don't know how they came to be. They just appeared and there's no information about them. There's also one version that is in its own standalone category because it's so crazy different from the rest. You're just going to have to watch and see what it is. But now that that's out of the way, let's just jump right into it. In the Clone Wars, we got our first look at a different version of a Rancor called the Jungle Rancor or Hunter Rancor. We got to see these in the Clone Wars episode Hunters when Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka crash land on Felucia and bump into these 2 beasts wandering around the forest, no doubt looking for some little farmers to snack on. This was a synthetic breed of a standard Rancor. These were actually a reptilian variation of the Rancor that were bred by animal dealers, most times used for fighting, and they became native to Felucia. One was originally in the first cut of the Clone Wars movie in 2008. Ventress corners Anakin and Ahsoka with the baby hut, and R2 opens a trapdoor they're standing on, dropping them into a pit where they have a lightsaber fight just as a jungle Rancor comes out to play. Ventress and Anakin are literally trying to kill each other while trying to avoid being smashed by this massive beast. They eventually jump on top of him to continue their fight, and when it tries to eat Ahsoka, she stabs him in the nose with her lightsaber, and he stumbles backwards and sits on top of Ventress, giving them enough time to escape, but shortly after, Ventress, being a little sus, ignites her lightsaber in probably one of the most uncomfortable places you could have a lightsaber shoved. Poor guy, but you can see these Rancors actually have webbing between their fingers. They also have much brighter skin colors as well as sharp spines running along their body. Their sense of smell was much better than standard Rancors, and they often lived in small herds on Felucia and actually coexisted in somewhat harmony with the local farmers. Guess they gotta find something else to snack on. It was also featured in the Clone Wars lightsaber duels game for the Wii. Did anyone else play that? You could play this battle and he would come out and just smash all of your clone troopers in the background for like 10 minutes. By the time the fight was over, you lost 100 troops. Next is a Rancor that is truly terrifying and for a while was just considered a myth. This is the Bull Rancor. This was a beast who was rumored to populate the deepest jungles of Felucia. They had massive tusks coming out of their faces and a huge spiked armor-plated tail. These were much larger than most other Rancors and were incredibly dangerous. These ones were usually pretty old and exceedingly rare. Every few years, the natives said they would see one emerge from the deepest jungle. The species was much larger than a standard Rancor. They were mainly found on Felucia, and sometimes when they couldn't find prey to eat, they would actually revert to eating giant fungi fungi that grew on the planet. And some people thought that this was the explanation for how massive they were and what gave them their distinct pale blue-gray color. They also had enormous horns that sprouted out from their massive heads. In The Force Unleashed, the Bull Rancor guards the Rancor graveyard on Felucia. The farmers thought that these were unable of being detained or captured, although after you fight and kill Shaak Ti, her apprentice Maris Brood comes out and lets herself fall to the dark side after her master's death and uses her rage to fight you. But as she slipped to the dark side, she was able to bond with a Bull Rancor that became her new pet for a few minutes until you stab her in the head with your lightsaber and give it a nice dose of Force lightning to the face before you let the ground swallow it up. RIP. You also got to play as one in the Star Wars Kinect video game, which was pretty sweet, but other than that, the Bull Rancor has been pretty rare to see in Star Wars. There was also another Rancor in the Force Unleashed game you fight when you're on Felucia. This was called a Felucian Rancor, and for the most part, it resembles a pretty standard Rancor, the biggest reason being that it was native to Felucia, but also it was really cool to see these because a lot of the times, the natives would often paint these with ancient tribal war paint and sometimes ride them into battle, and they just looked really awesome. Now next is our first Force-altered Rancor. Now, like I was saying before, most of these were changed through Sith alchemy. This is an ancient art perfected by the Sith of Korriban. It combined scientific lore with dark side philosophy to create actual nightmare creatures. They use this to transform life, reshaping flesh and bone to literally make new creatures that didn't previously exist. And these creatures are called Sith spawn, unnatural and built for near immortality and usually violent beyond measure, making for the perfect weapon and when bonded with, the perfect guardian. Now, before we talk about the first Sith spawn, I want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark, the personal VPN that will help protect you and all your information while you're online so you can focus on the important things in life, like not getting eaten by the next Rancor you see. Surfshark VPN was literally made to help keep you safe and protect all your personal information while you're online. When any of your devices connect to the internet while using Surfshark, all your information is protected with encryption to prevent anyone who shouldn't be getting your data from getting your data. Not only is it a great form of online protection, but it also lets you virtually travel the world with just the tap of your finger. If you live in the US and you're trying to access some movies or TV shows that we don't have on streaming services, all you have to do is change your IP address with Surfshark to whatever country the show or movie is available in, and boom, you're back to watching your favorite show. Surfshark has over 3,200 different servers in 65 different countries. Their VPN works on Windows, Mac, Android, and iPhone. Any device that you need protected, they've got you covered. And right now, they're running a special offer where if you'd like to try their service today, you can go to surfshark.com and enter promo code MichaelJ for 83% off your subscription and get an extra 3 months for free. Head over to the link in the description and try them out today. Now, back to dangerous creatures that shouldn't be able to fly, but someone gave them wings. This is a Rancor dragon, probably one of my favorite variations of Rancor in the Star Wars universe. This specific Rancor dragon is Butch, and he is from the comic series Dawn of the Jedi. Go read it, it's amazing. It's so cool to see a Rancor with wings, and believe it or not, this is one of the only Force-altered Rancors that was not created through Sith alchemy. In this series, 3 different Force users learn about the Force and its effects on the world around them, and in one of the 9 great temples, the Temple of Science, Force users would combine Force and science to enhance armor, weapons, and genetically manipulate wild creatures to serve the Force. One girl did this with her master and used a female Rancor to create a Rancor dragon, which she names Butch, and she rides around on it throughout the entire series. At one point, it gets pushed into an acid pool with Force lightning by a Dark user, and so Butch runs away before her owner Shay even gets to use her. But the way that they ride this beast is very much similar to how Anakin controls the Reek in Episode 2, and similar to how Baby Yoda calms the Rancor in Boba Fett. But sadly, by the end of the first part of the series, the Rancor dragon gets struck by lightning and it shreds her wings, leaving her immobile. Luckily though, the next part we get to see more of Butch and Shay, and in this part, a second Rancor dragon is created belonging to Shay's master. I guess after riding her Rancor dragon in the first part, he just had to make one himself. I mean, who wouldn't want a Rancor dragon? It'd make for a cool pet, but an even cooler way to get around town. Can you imagine pulling up to the drive-thru on one of these? It's just really cool to see Jedi riding around on Rancor dragons. And these aren't the normal Jedi. This is before the Jedi Order, so they're called the Jedi, which only saw the Force as one thing and allowed themselves to channel the dark side to become more powerful in battle. It's just a really cool story all around with cool characters and even cooler beasts. Next up, we have the Gnarled Rancor. This was another natural subspecies of Rancor that was introduced in the Star Wars Galaxies game. You could find this species on Dathomir as well, and at one point, an Imperial scientist hired a spacer, kind of like a bounty hunter or a smuggler, to go to Dathomir and retrieve a DNA sample from a Gnarled Rancor so that he could create an army of Cyber Rancors, which brings us to our very next variation, the Cyber or Cybernetic Rancor. As I'm sure you can guess, this was an enhanced Rancor with synthetic mutations, and as far as I can tell, there have only been 2 instances of these existing. One of them was in the Darth Vader comic that came out in 2015. Vader is basically fighting against this mad scientist who has been cybernetically enhancing beasts and trying to kill Vader. And at one point, she releases a cybernetically altered Rancor to kill Vader. You can see she's upgraded its eyeballs, no doubt, so she can relay what the Rancor sees back to her displays, so she can see through the Rancor. I'm sure this also includes a lot of technology to analyze and study what the Rancor is fighting, as well as how the Rancor is performing. And not only are its eyes replaced, but she went ahead and upgraded its insides. At one point, Vader tries to reach out and force choke the Rancor, and once it recognizes what's happening, the plates she puts in his thorax reinforce to allow him to keep breathing even while Vader is force choking him. She's also installed in using neural dampeners so the Rancor doesn't feel any pain. Vader cuts its fingers off and the Rancor doesn't even notice. She's also added stimulants, so at her command, she can inject the Rancor with adrenaline, so it just goes absolutely crazy and demolishes whatever it's fighting. Vader ends up killing it by using a lightsaber throw right down the middle of his skull, severing the neural link to its brain that the scientist is using to control it. It's a really neat fight, you definitely need to check out the comics, and it's also really cool to see a cybernetically altered Rancor in action. The other time we got to see one was in the Old Republic game, and to be honest, I didn't know Rancors like this existed until I was doing research for this video. These Rancors had increased movement speed, making them a lot faster for travel and combat, and it looks like this guy here has a targeting computer hooked up to one of his eyes. It looks like he has some energy weaponry attached to a bionic arm. I wouldn't be surprised if he could make a fist and shoot it out of his arm and then retract it like Warp Dark Matter from the Buzz Lightyear movie.
Oh, come on, buddy. That's no way to treat your partner. Warp?
Maybe the scientist has a joystick that can control his second bionic arm. It also looks like he has a tiny bionic leg. Also, lots of armor covering up parts of him that are bionic now. I wouldn't be surprised if all this is just armor plating to turn him into a tank. I feel like he has to have a repulsor system somewhere in there, some kind of jetpack to get him airborne off the ground. That would be really cool. Next is the Tyrant Rancor. The first time we ever heard about him was in the role-playing game sourcebook Star Wars Threats of the Galaxy. This version is much larger than most other Rancors. These were Rancors who were transported off-world into different habitats that weren't prepared for such a large predator, which essentially allowed these beasts to go God mode, going after whatever they wanted unthreatened, and more importantly, eating whatever they wanted, which allowed them to grow to the enormous size that they did. And if you played on Mos Espa in the Star Wars Connect game, you could actually play as a Tyrant Rancor. You see a Jawas sandcrawler pull up, and they're literally using the whole entire thing to store this Rancor. First off, how on earth did these Jawas even capture a Tyrant Rancor? It must have taken hundreds, if not thousands, or maybe they drugged it while it was sleeping or something. But the Rancor smashes his way out and then casually eats a Tusken Raider and then wanders off and smashes a passing by pod racer. You can see they've got a tusk going vertically up their face and large spined humps running down their back. We also got to see one in the Old Republic game. You can acquire pets that don't really do anything for you in battles, but they can follow you around and you can display them in your home and they look pretty cool. But you're able to get a little miniature baby Tyrant Rancor as well as some awesome other variations that are only featured in this game. If we take a look, we can see that they have a juvenile bull Rancor as well as a canyon Rancor, a marsh Rancor, irradiated Rancor, a mountain Rancor, an Athema spawn, a nocturnal Rancor, savannah Rancor, and even a war Rancor. Most of these don't indicate many distinctive details, but are mainly named after where they are found, and that's why they're not going to be a big part of this video. You can't tell much of a difference between them because they're adolescent and all based off the same beast model, but it's still cool to see them in the game. Next is a Rancor that Palpatine actually created after Return of the Jedi. This Rancor variation was called a Chrysalide, and it too falls under the category of Force-altered Rancors. They appeared in Star Wars Dark Empire 2 issue 5, which came out out back in 1995, it was a series that followed Luke as he started his quest to rebuild the Jedi. In this series, Palpatine is reborn, and at one point, rebels, led by Lando Calrissian, are using Viper war droids to attack the Emperor's Citadel, and to stop them, Palpatine releases a handful of Chrysalides that halt the rebel assault and actually make them retreat. Chrysalides are these mutated Rancors that were originally created by ancient Sith. The higher-ups would use them as pets or protectors. They stored the information on how to create them in holocrons, and for many years they were lost until Emperor Palpatine rediscovered the process and created many of his own, which he then used to save himself from a rebel attack. Since their teeth could chew through metal, he released them on the army of Viper droids attacking, and they were absolutely disintegrated. Surprisingly enough, you'll never guess who the only recorded person to defeat a Chrysalide was. Yup, R2-D2. While they were escaping, one jumps up and grabs onto the spacecraft as they're retreating, and R2 blasts its fingers and it falls to its death below. Pretty neat creature, but that's the last we saw of those guys. Wow, all of these, and we didn't even mention some of the craziest Rancors. I think I subconsciously saved the best for last, but I'm gonna split this up into 2 videos because I don't want it to be too long. Part 2 is going to be the craziest Sith-created Rancors and underwater beasts that you didn't know existed, so make sure you've got post notifications on so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments what your favorite Rancor from this video was. And remember, the Force will be with you, always.